July 2021 hailed a return to IWM Duxford for airshow dispatches. The fifth flying day of the year had a 19-squadron theme, the first squadron in the RAF to take delivery of the Spitfire. So it was appropriate that one of the highlights was the Imperial War Museum's Spitfire Mk1A, flown in typically lyrical style by John Romain. It was one of 4 Second World War aircraft that flew during the day, the others being a Hurricane, Harvard and another type operated by 19 Squadron, the P51D Mustang. But as the day's most unusual participant, a very rare airshow appearance indeed by a Nanchang CJ-6 in the colours of the Sri Lankan Air Force. This is our pick of the action. The warmest of welcomes to IWM Duxford, and once again it is for one of the Imperial War Museum's flying days, showcase days as they were known last year, a halfway house between an airshow and a normal day at the museum. But let's get right into the action with a surprise contribution from the US Air Force 48th Fighter Wing, a pair of F-15E Strike Eagles from RAF Lakenheath. The 48th Fighter Wing is part of the USAF 3rd Air Force and is also known as the Liberty Wing. It was formed in 1952 flying F-84 Thunderjets and later F-100 Super Sabres and F-86 Sabres. Initially based in France, the unit moved to Lakenheath in 1960 and transitioned to the F-4 Phantom and then the F-111, with the latter aircraft taking part in Operation Desert Storm. In the early 1990s, they transitioned to the F-15, which has supported various operations in Afghanistan, Iraq and Libya. Today, they field 1 squadron of F-15Cs and 2 squadrons of F-15Es. Later this year, the 48th will become the first USAF unit outside the United States to operate the F-35A, with 2 squadrons arriving in December 2021. Let's get our 2 Battle of Britain fighters into the air. The Spitfire Mk1A is first off, followed by the Hurricane Mk1, which we'll be seeing in a few minutes' time. IWM's Spitfire Mk1A N3200 flew with number 19 Squadron once. Her first combat mission was flown by the unit's then commander, Squadron Leader Geoffrey Stevenson, during the evacuation of Dunkirk on the 26th of May 1940, and it ended abruptly when the aircraft was shot down and crash-landed on a beach in Sangatte. Stevenson survived the war in German captivity and resumed his RAF career afterwards, but the wreck of his aircraft wasn't discovered until 1986. It was painstakingly restored and returned to flight in 2014 and once again wears the colours of 19 Squadron. It's flown today by John Romain. '19 Squadron received its very first Spitfires 2 years prior in August 1938, and they were the first RAF unit to do so. They were already a prestigious squadron, having been formed in 1915 and flying in the First World War with aircraft such as the Avro 504, Spad 7 and Sopwith Dolphin. Then, during the Second World War, they flew Spitfire Mk1s, Mk2s, Mk5s and Mk9s. That takes us up until January 1944, and we'll pick up their story from 1944 onwards later in the episode. But with the Spitfire, their contribution was extremely significant, not just at Dunkirk, but also in the Battle of Britain as part of the No. 12 Group's so-called Big Wing, based here at Duxford.
Killed about 8 to 10 people.
Let's stay with the Battle of Britain now with this genuine Battle of Britain veteran, Hawker Hurricane Mark I B7497. Formerly a 501 Squadron, this aircraft was delivered in September 1940. On the 28th of the same month, pilot officer Everett Brian Rogers was flying this very aircraft on a patrol mission over Kent when he was shot down by a flight of Bf-109s. The pilot bailed out and survived, and the wreckage of his aircraft was excavated and put into storage. Decades later, she was taken on by Hawker Restorations and returned to flight in 2018. The pilot today is Neil Oakman. But now we have a complete change of pace and a rather interesting opportunity to talk about competition aerobatics, because what we have here is a trio of designs that represent the evolution of aerobatic machines over the last half-century. First into the air, we have this French-registered Yak 50 flown by the Dutch pilot Peter Kuipers, who is better known for being the chief pilot of B-17 Flying Fortress Sally B, which is also based here at Duxford. The Yak-50 first flew in 1975 and saw immediate success at the World Aerobatic Championships, winning the top award in the hands of Soviet pilot Viktor Letsko 1 year later. It was one of 2 world titles held by the Yak-50, the other was in 1982. This is particularly impressive because when you compare it to its contemporaries like the Zlin 50, on a merely visual level at least, they simply shouldn't compare. The Zlin 50 looks like a reasonably modern, purpose-built aerobatic design, whereas the Yak-50 looks old and rugged, utilitarian, and almost agricultural. The Yak-50 also weighs 750 kilograms. That's 50% more than a Zlin 50 and double the weight of a Laser 200. But by the mid-1980s, the era of the Yak-50 had passed, and we turn now to 2 of its successors. The sky blue aircraft is a CAT 232 flown by Diana Britton, and the red one is an Extra 300L flown by James Hepner. And this display is the duo's first ever formation performance, taking place just 1 year after James's solo airshow debut. The CAT 230 was developed in 1985 for the competition aerobatic wing of the French Air Force, the Équipe de Voltige. Upgraded models, the CAT 231 and CAT 232, came along in 1990 and 1997 respectively. And this family of aircraft has claimed world aerobatic titles in 1990, 1994, 1998 and 2000, always in the hands of French Air Force pilots. Whereas the Yak is stressed to +9 and -6G, the CAP is stressed to plus or minus 10. The Yak-50 has a roll rate of 200 degrees per second. The CAP 231 upped this to 270. That was still considered a little slow, and it was because the aircraft had a wooden wing spar which flexed and warped during fast rolls. So soon the CAP 232 was developed, which had a carbon fibre wing spar. That upped the roll rate to 420 degrees per second, which is still extremely impressive today, and it also made the wing's structure much lighter by 30 kilograms in fact, and that means there's much less roll inertia and therefore more precise roll stops than in either the previous version, the CAP 231, or a heavier all-metal aircraft like the Yak 50. Diana Britton began flying in 1980 and quickly became interested in competition aerobatics. She flew the CAP 10 and later the CAP 21, the Extra 230 and the Extra 260. And in the latter aircraft, she became the first woman to be crowned the British National Aerobatic Champion in 1995. In recent years, she's mentored several new aerobatic pilots like James Hepner, who we're about to see flying the Extra 300L. The Extra 300 family was another big upset in the world of competition aerobatics. It had actually been around since the 1980s, but they've been an extremely common sight at competitions, air shows and air races ever since then. This is an Extra 300L, the L standing for low wing. It also has 2 seats, a shorter wingspan and a shorter fuselage. The 300L is the best-selling version of the Extra 300. With 2 seats, it wasn't really designed for competing at the top level, although it still has a roll rate of some 400 degrees per second, and like the CAP 232, it's stressed to plus or minus 10 G. But where the Extra differs from the CAP is in the longevity of its design. Newer, uprated versions, specifically the Extra 330 SC, still dominate competition aerobatics today and hold the most prestigious title at 5 out of the last 6 World Aerobatic Championships. James has been competing at the intermediate level for several years, but joined the airshow circuit in 2020, and he watches airshow dispatches. I know that because earlier this year he recognised me from my voice as that guy on the internet who noticed a tiny little correction he made during his performance at a previous Duxford event last year, but I'm certainly not spotting anything this time. For our next display item, we have Nigel Wilson flying Anglia Warbird's AT-6C Harvard 2A, which is our third genuine Second World War aircraft of the day. This one was built in 1942 and was used for training during the war with the South African Air Force. Although South Africa didn't fully retire the Harvard until 1995, this one ended up being transferred to the Portuguese Air Force in 1969. It was sold onto the civilian market 10 years later and has been based in the UK ever since then. The aircraft now lives at Earl's Cone and is used for warbird experience flights, but also as a training aid for pilots progressing onto warbirds like the Mustang and the Spitfire, just like it would have been in the 1940s. The colour scheme it wears is entirely fictitious, but inspired by the SNJs used by the US Navy. From the T6 to a more modern radial-engined trainer, the Nanchang CJ-6A. Designed and built by the Chinese aircraft manufacturer Nanchang, now known as Hongdu, the CJ-6 first flew in 1960. It was originally intended to serve with the People's Liberation Army Air Force, but over 2,000 have been built for 10 military operators, and it has also become a popular and relatively low-cost warbird in North America. Despite its age, the CJ-6 is still very much in service today, and only in 2019 the Sri Lankan Air Force established its first ever national aerobatic team, the Blue Eagles, flying 5 CJ-6s. This one was built in 1976 and it wears the old all-grey training scheme of the Sri Lankan Air Force. But today, all 5 of Sri Lanka's aircraft wear a blue and yellow paint scheme, allowing them to be used interchangeably for both training and aerobatic duties. We're seeing this one in the hands of its owner, John Ware. But now into the air, P51D Mustang, Miss Helen. And this is where we pick up the story of 19 Squadron, because it was with the P51B and P51C Mustang that the unit re-equipped in 1944, reflecting their move from a defensive force to an offensive one. They participated in Operation Market Garden in Arnhem and carried out close air support duties after D-Day. They were then moved up to Scotland, where they were used for long-range escort duties, and it was during that spell in April 1945 that they re-equipped with the P51D, which is, of course, the mark of Mustang that you're seeing here, albeit in US Army Air Force colours and being flown by Stu Goldspink. But 19 Squadron's story doesn't end with the conclusion of the Second World War. They went on to fly such types as the de Havilland Hornet, the Gloucester Meteor, Hawker Hunter, English Electric Lightning and F4 Phantom. Most recently, they flew the Hawk T1 up until the unit was disbanded in 2011. Ten years on, 19 Squadron was revived in April 2021, not as a flying squadron, but as the new name of the Air Surveillance and Control Systems Control and Reporting Centre, and their role is to detect and identify aircraft operating in British airspace. So the Mustang in now for its final pass, which will be a very photogenic topside. That brings to a close this episode of Airshow Dispatches. Next time, it's a brand new event for us, the Little Gransden Air and Car Show at the home of the Global Stars. But until then, thank you very much for your company. From me, Adam Landau, it's goodbye for now.